So if you don't like the materialist sort of XX, XY chromosome thing, how would you answer the question, what is a woman? How would you sort of maybe improve upon what Matt had to say in his documentary?
You could almost put it upside down. Instead of asking what is a woman, you could just ask, what is a person who gestates and gives birth to a child? What do you call that? Like, what is that? And then it's flipping the question backwards, and it's like, well, yeah, what do we call that? You know, and so from a biological perspective, as I'd mentioned, sex is determined by how an organism is organized for reproduction. And from a Catholic perspective, it's not simply the parts. Like you have the part to do that, you have the part to do that. It's more in the full sense of vocation to fatherhood and motherhood. And so the body does reveal to us our identity, whereas with gender theory, the body is meaningless. It doesn't reveal anything, which is really strange how they try to say, well, look, there's a little brain science saying this, or what about intersex conditions? It's like, well, wait a minute. Are you telling me we should look to the body to tell us our identity? Ooh. I mean, if you're going to be a dualist, at least behave yourself and be a good one. Like, don't go looking at the body if you want me to tell me that the identity is untethered from the body. Like, you need to stay in your camp.
Because that's the number one thing I kept getting told to me when I would bring this up is, what about intersex people? What about people with ambiguous genitalia?
Yeah.
That's a great response.
Yeah. I mean, that's the start of a response, but then we also have to go there. We're like, well, let's look at these intersex conditions and see if it really is saying what you're saying. Because there was a woman named Anne Fausto Sterling in academia, and she said, you know what? Intersex is more common than people who have red hair. 2% of the whole population is intersex, and sex itself is a spectrum. There aren't just two sexes. There's all kinds of... So she's teaching this at all the universities settings, and the students are like, oh, wow, I had no idea intersex was as common as having red hair, and it's 2% of the whole population. I had no idea that I'm sitting here in this class, and there could be 8 other students who are intersex, and oh my goodness, I feel so bad, I never even knew. Well, let's look at her numbers. If you look at all of the disorders of sexual development that she kind of lays out, and you start going through them, it's like 90-something% of these are not intersex conditions. They are disorders of sexual development. You start going down them, like one is Klinefelter's. You hear that one thrown out. Well, what if a person has Klinefelter's? I mean, in that intersex, there's no clinical sense in which Klinefelter's or Turner's is an intersex condition. So Klinefelter's is when a man is born, and when he's conceived, he either inherits an extra X chromosome from his mother or father. It could actually inherit several X's. So instead of just XY, he could be XXY or XXXXY. And so what that will do for him developmentally, he'll have smaller testicles, a little bit of enlargement of the breast tissue, but he's completely male. In fact, some men will live their entire lives with Klinefelter's unaware that they even have it. A lot of guys don't even know they have it until they seek treatment for infertility, and the doctor explains, oh, you have Klinefelter's, but he's a man. And so the female equivalent of that would be Turner syndrome. And so that's when a woman is born with a missing or partially deleted second X chromosome from most of all of her cells. And since you need 2 X chromosomes to have a fully functioning ovary, these women are typically infertile and they don't experience normal puberty. So they tend to be a little bit shorter in stature, but they're fully women. And so there's no clinical sense that Klinefelter or Turner's is an intersex condition. And so then the next one that Anne Fausto threw out there was LOCA, which is late onset congenital adrenal hyperplasia. These are women, many of whom can give birth. Many of them don't even know they have this condition until they're in their mid-20s. There's no genital ambiguity going on whatsoever. You remove just these couple ones out of her statistics, and 2% slides down to 0.02%. Now, do the math on 0.02%. It is 1 out of 5,000 or 2 out of every 10,000 live births. And that's the more accurate figure for intersex conditions. And so we need to first be fair about the numbers. And so that's the first thing I'd address. Okay, are you blowing out these numbers to make it look like it's bigger than it is? But even if there's one on the planet, what does that tell us? And so let's look at those. And so the most common one is called congenital adrenal hyperplasia. And this is when the woman's body is producing too much testosterone. Now, boys can have it too, but because it doesn't cause any genital abnormalities, it's not considered an intersex condition for the males. So for the girls, it is. And about 1 out of every 30,000 experience this is the most common intersex condition. And so for the girl, there's going to be a slight virilization of her genitalia, meaning that it's going to be a slightly enlarged clitoris. So congenital adrenal hyperplasia, the woman has an excess of testosterone in her body. And because of that, she'll be more masculinized in her features. So she'll have a more developed clitoris. It's going to be slightly enlarged. And these women tend to have more testosterone, but they are female beings. It's the other one, my mistake, a complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. That will be XY.
Okay.
That will have the SRY gene. But, however, because her body cannot respond to testosterone in the natural way, and then in her case, she will develop as female. She'll have the undescended testes that are later removed. And so these are intersex conditions, but what will happen when a baby is born with an ambiguous genitalia, or when the genitalia doesn't quite line up with the chromosomes, what they will do is they'll bring in a team of experts. They'll bring in a urologist, a specialist in pediatric medicine, an endocrinologist, even a psychologist, and they'll meet with the family. And then they'll say, okay, I know this delivery wasn't quite what you were expecting, and this may be a little surprise that things didn't look quite normal, but we're going to do some testing and we're going to do some digging, and we're going to try to find out with you exactly what's going on. And so with a little bit of research, they can find out, yes, this is a biological male, but here's what's going on. Or this is a biological female, but this is a disorder of sexual development that's happening. Now, the most rare case is something called ovotesticular disorder, or true hermaphroditism. This is where a person will have both ovarian and testicular tissue in their body and can have many different variations of form, but typically only one of the two gonads will be functional. So we don't have any cases of someone that can impregnate themselves. So you can't have a functional ovary, functional sperm, and the woman produces asexually. We don't have that. It's typically very clearly one or the other. Some people have something called a mosaic, which is where two sperm, an X and a Y, fertilize an egg at the same time. And so the person can have XX and XY chromosomes in the same body. And then there's another thing, lastly, called chimerism, where you've got two eggs, one male, one female, and one of the embryos dies and is resorbed or absorbed by the other embryo. And so this individual will have two sets of chromosomes, two sets of DNA in the same individual. Now, typically they don't have ambiguous genitalia, but that's kind of a broad overview scope of all that stuff. Wow. I mean, it can be a little bit overwhelming.
About it being a new language, yeah.
Yeah, it is. But these things, you can only identify a disorder of sexual development in light of a sexual binary. If you don't have male and female, then you couldn't even know what is a disorder of sexual development. It's like, well, how could I know I'm missing a finger unless I know I'm supposed to have 5 as a person? Yeah.
Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Would you like this beautiful, very high quality, definitely not made in China, not that there's anything wrong with that, Pints with Aquinas beer stein for free, sent to your door? Would you also like a copy of The Jill sent to your door 4 times a year? This is the Pints with Aquinas newspaper, by the way. If you do, go to mattfradd.locals.com and become an annual supporter for any amount. We'll send you that stuff for free, and you get a bunch of other free things in return. You'll get more information by going over to mattfradd.locals.com. Thanks.